Three's the Charm by MissCHSparkles. Chapter 10. Hermione's POV. Soon be there, her dad said softly. They were waiting behind a traffic light. Yes, Hermione replies, her stomach churning with butterflies. It was odd, but this was very like the first time she had gone to Hogwarts. Just the fact she was moving far away from her parents for almost a year had been a terrifying experience. I'll take lots of photos, she added for her parents' benefit. You'll be able to see how well I'm doing. That would be good, her mother admitted, almost tearful at the idea of Hermione going away. Crookshanks growled in his wicker basket. He was not impressed with the travel arrangements at all. Hermione leaned over and cooed, It's all right, Crookshanks. I'll let you out on the train. In a whisper she added, Remember, you can't attack the rat that Ron has. At least not yet. We'll take care of it, okay? Crookshanks eyed her with his bright yellow eyes, and seemed to understand. She smiled. He was a very clever cat, and she knew he'd refrained from attacking Scabbers. She had explained at length about Scabbers to Crookshanks, and why he couldn't do anything to the rat, because she knew how intelligent her cat really was. Idly, she wondered what her parents would think if they knew how intelligent the orange moggy was. Will your cat be okay? Her dad now asks as the car pulled forward. If you're going to let him out. He'll be fine, Hermione assured him. I'll be in a compartment anyway, with the door closed. Crookshanks can relax on a seat or on my lap if it's full. I wonder how many children go to this Hogwarts. Her mother wondered aloud. Quite a few, I imagine, her father replied. Didn't that Professor McGonagall say it was the only school for magical kids in the whole of Britain? There must be thousands going there. I'm not sure, Hermione said slowly, already knowing the answer. From what I've read, non-magic folk are far outnumber the magical ones, so I believe it's less than 1,000 at Hogwarts. Maybe 800 or so? That's not much for a population, her dad said. And how many of these are Muggle-born, you would say? A good third at the very least, Hermione said, seeing what her dad is getting at. The wizarding population is really small compared to ours. Incredible, her dad muttered. They must really need Muggle-borns to make up their numbers. In a way, but it is important that I learn how to be a witch, Hermione said quickly. If I didn't learn, my magic could become out of control. We know, darling, her mother said soothingly. Just don't forget where you come from. I won't, Mum, Hermione said solemnly, and she promised herself that, this time, she wouldn't become distant from her parents. She belonged to 2 worlds, and she would find a way to bridge those worlds, one way or another. Ron's POV. What's wrong, Ginny? Ron asked his little sister, who was moodily sitting in a squashy armchair. She shot him a miserable look, and said in a slightly whiny voice, It's not fair! I want to go to Hogwarts too! Why can't I go? Because you're too young, Ron explained, vaguely remembering how upset she had been at being left behind. But it's just a year, and then you'll be at Hogwarts. I can't wait that long, she said, her little face red with misery. It's going to be just me here, and I'll die of boredom. Don't be a silly Billy, Ginny, Ron said, employing the phrase he used to call her when he was younger. There's plenty you can do here, like practicing your flying with our old brooms. This got her attention. She jerked and her mouth fell open, and she stared at him in shock. Ron grinned before saying smugly, I've known you sneak out to fly when you were busy. I've seen you in the air. Actually, none of that he had just said was a lie. He knew she got different meaning from his words. You're not going to tell Mum or Dad, are you? She asked anxiously, and he shook his head. No, but you can owe me a favour, he told her, and she looked relieved as she asked. What kind of favour? Just a favour, Ron replied, flopping down in a chair near her. I don't know what it'll be, though. Just something for the future. She considered this before nodding. Okay. Pleased he distracted her, Ron now said, Hey, if you get really lonely, you can always visit that Luna Lovegood girl. This caused Ginny to pull her face. What? Ron asked. a little confused by her reaction. As far as he knew, Ginny and Luna had always gotten along, but he'd never really paid attention to his friendship until the 5th year. "She's weird," Ginny blurted out suddenly. "Ever since her mum died, she's gotten really weird." "I thought she has always been weird," Ron said nonplussed. "She has," Ginny acknowledged, "but she's become obsessed with nargles and horned snorkax." What?" Ron questioned as he remembered to act like he'd never heard of those things. "They're imaginary creatures she's made up," his sister replied rather exasperatedly. "She's always going on about them, and her dad encourages it. He acts like they're real too." "He's the one who writes that magazine. The Dribbler?" Ron asked. "Quibbler," Ginny corrected. "And yeah, he does." Her dad occasionally got an issue. He seemed to find the ludicrous articles amusing. Their mother, on the other hand, didn't exactly like it. She said it was too full of ridiculous conspiracy theories. Ron had to admit they both had a point. The articles were funny, but it was a little bit disconcerting that Luna and Xenophilius Lovegood believed every single thing they wrote. But while he didn't especially like Xenophilius Lovegood, Luna's weirdness was part of her charm. Sure, a lot of things she believed in were either untrue or didn't exist, but that didn't mean they all were. From what Harry had said in passing, Luna had a rather unique perspective on life that shouldn't just be shot down. "If her dad believes in this stuff," he began slowly, "then that's probably why she believes it. I mean, when Dad tells us that muggles aren't animals, we believe him, right?" "Yeah," Ginny said slowly. "Well, that's how it works with Luna," Ron explained. "That's why the Death Eater kids grow up nasty, because the stuff their parents tell them." During this summer, he had realised that a lot of the rubbish Malfoy had sprouted, and the ideas he had endorsed, were mostly due to his dad. Whether it came down to actually being a Death Eater, Malfoy did not have it in him. He was a gutless worm who wasn't as evil as he claimed to be. Ron still hated him, but quite frankly, he couldn't be bothered with the bloody Git. Dear Merlin, he'd have to spend another 7 years in the same building as the Git. In some ways, life was very cruel to him. "So Luna's weird because of her dad?" Ginny asked slowly. "Well, partly," Ron said as he hastened to explain. "Kids don't always grow up the way their parents want them to. You can get good kids from bad families and vice versa. From what you've told me, Luna's pretty weird on her own because that's who she is. And well, it's harmless, isn't it? Looking for these creatures?" "Yeah," Ginny sighed. "It's just... it's annoying me sometimes." This made Ron snort. "Ginny, have you forgotten we live with some of the most annoying people on the planet? If Percy's not boring us all, then Fred and George are obnoxious gits. Mum drives us crazy with chores and homework." He looks right at her and says, "Don't let the fact that she can probably be annoying as hell keep you from remaining friends. I bet there are times she can be great fun to be with." His sister considered this point before shrugging. "Okay, I'll do my best," she said with a slight huff. Ron smiled, knowing he wasn't going to get a better answer. Ginny was very stubborn, and he suspected boredom and loneliness would drive her to seek out the strange blonde girl. It would do Ginny some good to have some company during the year she couldn't go to Hogwarts. And it would likely do Luna some good, having some company that wasn't her crazy father. "You do that," he said with a smile. She still looked a little gloomy, so he said, "Hey, at least you'll get a day out in Diagon Alley with Mum. You'll enjoy that." She made another shrugging motion just as their mother called, "Ginny, dear, are you all ready?" "Coming, Mum," Ginny called back, pulling herself up and heading into the kitchen. Ron watched her go a little sadly. He was sorry he couldn't do more for her. Maybe if he tried to write fairly regularly, that might help. He heard a loud thump and knew Fred and George were bringing their cases downstairs. It was something of a miracle that nothing was ever broken. Percy was probably giving his badge another clean. The guy was really obsessed. Ron deliberately ignored the fact he had been a bit silly with his own. He remembered that Percy had done his best to help for the younger years. He just hadn't been so good with the older years. To people like Fred and George, he was a killjoy obsessed with obeying every single rule, so they made it a rule to never listen to him. Ron wondered if being frustrated by this attitude was one reason Percy had become distant. Why he had gotten so close to people like Crouch, Fudge and Umbridge. But he wasn't sure, but he had a feeling that Hermione might be able to explain. While she was perfectly capable of breaking rules without any encouragement, she preferred to abide by most of them. She'd surely understand why someone would be obsessed with rule-keeping. Ron considered himself somewhere between Hermione and Percy and the twins. When he didn't stick religiously to rules, he did not make it his mission in life to break most of them. Most of the rules he and his friends had broken had been in the aid of very good cause, like defeating Voldemort and helping their friends. It had made him wonder why so many rules they ended up breaking this time around. Oh well, at least this time they'd be able to take a few shortcuts. He got up and stretched. His picnic lunch was carefully packed into his hamper. That rat was locked up. His trunk was packed, and he had had breakfast. All he had to do was wait for the others, and they'd take the flue to a chimney near King's Cross, and he'd finally be reunited with Harry and Hermione. Harry's POV. Harry tried to contain his excitement, but it wasn't easy. He was sitting in the back with Dudley on their way to King's Cross Station, and he just couldn't wait. At long, long last, he'd be back where he belonged, along with Ron and Hermione. His uncle was grumbling in the front, and his aunt looked sour, but Harry didn't care. This time around, Dudley wasn't terrified to be in the same car as him, meaning he didn't have to put up with flinches or whimpers of fear. In fact, Dudley just seemed a little bit bored. He had put up with car journeys because of the destination. As Harry predicted, Dudley was being taken out for the day, to visit sweet and toy shops, to go to fast food joints, and possibly even the cinema. Harry had only ever been to the cinema when there had been a school trip, and he'd certainly never gone after he started Hogwarts. It would be quite nice to go there sometime with his friends, especially as he knew for a fact Ron had never gone to in his entire life. Introducing Ron to the world of movies and popcorn would be an interesting experience, to say the least. He hadn't spoken much to Dudley today, not with Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon around, letting their disapproval of Harry's trip be well known. Harry hadn't been given much breakfast, but he didn't care. He had money, and the food trolley on the Hogwarts Express called. He would be fine. Although he had learnt to not just scoff a mountain of sweets, because unless he had some savoury food, he would be rather hyper for a few days. At the time, he hadn't thought anything about it, but as he had matured, and thanks to a lecture from Hermione, realised that gorging on sweets wasn't the best plan. Not that it was going to stop him from getting a good supply. How long? Dudley whined. He was really getting bored. He might be getting on better with his cousin, but he didn't feel comfortable enough to converse with Harry while his parents were around. Just 5 more minutes, darling, Aunt Petunia assured. We just have to drop him off, and then we can go and have some fun. Okay, Dudley said as Uncle Vernon grumbled. What platform are you using, boy? Platform 9 3/4. Harry answered properly, and Uncle Vernon almost swerved in shock. Don't be ridiculous, boy, he roared at Harry. There's no such place. There is, Harry assured him, but you can only reach it through a magical barrier between platform 9 and 10. As Uncle Vernon scoffed, Harry asked calmly, Have you ever been there, Aunt Petunia? With my mum? He watched as his aunt stiffened and snapped, Never you mind, boy. Harry just smiled to himself and spotted Dudley giving him and his mother a curious look. So, even Dudley had picked up on how evasive that answer was. But because he couldn't resist, he asked, Do you want to come and see the train? Muggles can go through the barrier too, you know. Certainly not, Uncle Vernon barked. We are dropping you off, and that's it, boy. You're not our problem until next summer. Just asking, Harry said pleasantly, and out of the corner of his eye saw how thoughtful Dudley looked. His cousin wasn't quite brave enough to want to go and see the train, But in the future, well, they'd see. Well, don't, his aunt snapped back, just as they finally pulled into the car park. Uncle Vernon grumpily got out of the car and headed for the boot. Harry made to get out too, but paused to whisper to Dudley. Have a good term, Dud. Dudley glanced at him and mumbled something that sounded like, You too. Harry quickly got out of the car and, gratified to see that his uncle had dumped his trunk and Hedwig's cage onto a trolley, though he didn't look like he was going to wheel it anywhere. Thank you, Uncle Vernon, Harry said with a grin. I'll see you next summer. Uncle Vernon scabbled, grumbled and waved him away. Harry offered his aunt and cousin a wave before grabbing a hold of the trolley and heading to the station. He did pause when he heard the car start up and pull away. Turning to see Dudley watching him in the distance between the two of them rapidly increased. He offered his cousin one last friendly wave, and then the car was gone, swallowed up by traffic. He glanced at the clock and saw that he didn't have much time, only 20 minutes or so to get on the train. With a heave, he pushed his trolley forward and headed for the correct platform. For an 11-year-old boy pushing a heavy trolley complete with cage dabble, he presented a remarkable confidence to fellow commuters, who stared as he walked past. However, he didn't pay any attention to any of them, barring cursory glances to ensure they weren't a threat. Even after a whole summer of peace, he was still wary for danger, and he wondered if that would ever go away. Just as he reached the platform separating 3 and 4, he heard a very familiar voice. Packed with muggles, of course. He turned with a grin as a group of redheads trooped towards him. Nearly all of them were absorbed with pushing trolleys or hurrying along, but one of them caught his eye. Their face broke into a relieved grin, and Harry shot him a grin right back. Ron looked just like he remembered from so long ago. Though he noticed, with amusement, Ron had ensured there was no black smudge on his long nose. Come along now, Mrs. Weasley said as Harry sneakily followed them. Now, what's the platform again? Ron had told him that Mrs. Weasley asked this in order to include whoever wasn't going to Hogwarts. Before his first year, Ron had eagerly answered as his mum had asked, and now it was Ginny's turn. 9 3/4, came the little girl's adolescent voice, and Harry's heart gave a painful twinge. She was so young, so innocent, untouched by any darkness. He was at once happy and sad. How long before she would become the vibrant, strong, beautiful girl he had known? He watched as Ginny begged to be allowed to go, but briskly, but gently, told she wasn't old enough. Mrs. Weasley instructed all her children, especially the twins, to be good and no mischief. Harry tried not to gaze at Fred, but it wasn't easy. He was the first dead person Harry had come into contact with, and he fought to prevent a lump from forming in his throat. Fred was alive. Everything was okay. There was no need to grieve. He had done plenty of that this summer. Oh, are you a prefect, Percy? George was now mocking, but then Ron spoke up. We get it. You guys don't like prefects. The whole family stared at Ron in mild shock. Although it was hard to tell if the twins or Percy were the most shocked. Fred recovered and demanded, What's up with you? Just saying, Ron said with a small shrug. Bill was a prefect, and you guys didn't rib on him for it. Percy twitched, indicating he hadn't forgotten this point. Before either twin could hotly retort, Mrs. Weasley interrupted. That's enough, boys. You should all be proud of Percy's achievement, and as Ron said, your brother Bill was one too, and he became head boy. She said this last part rather dreamily. For her, it was still an incredibly proud moment. Fine, fine, Fred said, rolling his eyes. We'll leave Perfect Percy the prefect alone. Happy, Ron? Pretty happy, Ron quipped with a sly grin, as the twins stared at him. Where this confidence was coming from, he was not so easy to rile up. Almost as easy as Percy. Never mind that now. We need to start going through, Mrs. Weasley said, shooing the twins across the barrier, and they obeyed, charging for the barrier and disappearing. That was very sweet of you, Ron. Mrs. Weasley sighed, giving him a kiss on the cheek, which he only half-heartedly squirmed away from. Thank you, Ron, Percy said, in his rather formal way, but you could tell he was touched. I'm going through, Mother. And with that, he was away. Harry decided that now was as good a time as any to introduce himself, and he came forward rather hesitantly. Excuse me, he asked politely. How do you... He gestured helplessly towards the platform, and Mrs. Weasley rushed to his rescue. Don't know how to get onto the platform, dear? She asked kindly, and he nodded. She said, Well, not to worry. You just go straight at it and keep going. Don't stop. Best to do it at a run if you're nervous. I'll go with him, Ron piped up. There's not many muggles about here. All right, dear, go together, Mrs. Weasley said as Harry and Ron lined up, Ginny shooting Harry a curious look. On you go. Together, both boys rushed for the barrier, and a moment later were through. They kept wheeling their trolleys just a bit further than they needed before stopping. Breathing heavily, they stared at each other for a moment before throwing themselves at each other. Their tight hug probably lasted less than a minute, but to them it felt like a lifetime. Emotions coursed through their diminished bodies, but they could barely recognize any of them. Then they broke apart and looked around slightly self-consciously. Think anyone noticed? Ron muttered, but Harry shook his head. Everyone was too busy getting on the train or seeing off loved ones. I don't think so, Harry muttered back. We're safe for now. Safe? Ron chuckled. That feels weird, doesn't it? Yeah. Harry replied as Mrs. Weasley and Ginny made their way through. I'll go save a compartment, Harry murmured as Mrs. Weasley said. You got through all right, dear? Yes, I did. Thank you, Harry said warmly. I'll just go and save a compartment for me and Ron. Oh, what a sweet young man, Mrs. Weasley exclaimed, as Ron resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Some things never changed. As Harry blushed, after a month with the Dursleys, hearing a compliment embarrassed him a little, Mrs. Weasley called, Fred, George, come and give a hand. We're coming, they chorused as they seemed to appear out of nowhere. Help this young man put his trunk on the train, and then you can help with Ron's, she ordered, as Harry noticed that Ron seemed to have an extra piece of luggage this time around. It looked like a hamper, but Mrs. Weasley didn't usually have time to make anything except for sandwiches for the long journey. There you go, Fred said after helping Harry to heave his trunk up, along with Hedwig's cage. Thanks, Harry said gratefully, resisting the urge to reveal his scar. He didn't feel like being gawked at yet. Better find a compartment while we help little Ronnykins, George said with a wink, and Harry smiled. He quickly dragged his trunk with Hedwig's cage until he came to the end where there was a spare. Just as he was stowing everything away, Ron came puffing in. They're dying to know who you are, he remarked, 'cause me and you are friends so quickly. Funny that, Harry laughed, as he started to help Ron just as a sudden squeal distracted them. The boys turned and froze as they spotted a very familiar, bushy-haired figure down the corridor. She stared at them for a moment, hands clasped together in joy, before charging forward, dodging stray students, and throwing herself into their arms. The two boys hugged Hermione, even tighter than they had done themselves, as she half cried with happiness. The trio was together again. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. I love that. Weasley family coming in clutch. And also Ron sticking up for Percy because he doesn't want him to drift away anymore. I love that. And that reunion just at the very end. Oh, but it carries on next chapter. I can't wait to show you guys. Anyway, you all know the drill by this point, I hope. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and my pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.